My name is William Bill Garner, and I'm 58 years old, though some mornings I swear I feel closer to 80. Life has a way of speeding up when you get older, like someone keeps turning the dial faster and faster while you're just trying to stay standing. And before I tell you how I turned my daughter's wedding day into a moment she will never, never forget, I have to take you back to the exact moment when I realized something in my family had twisted into a shape I no longer recognized. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't anything Hollywood would write. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in your chest and stays there, heavy and cold, like a stone pulling everything downward. It was my birthday. Not a milestone one, not a sparkly number, just 58. A plain, uneventful Tuesday morning in late March that, in any other year, I would have welcomed with a cup of coffee on my porch, maybe a slice of leftover pie, and a phone call or two from the handful of people who still cared enough to remember the day I came into the world. My daughter, Emma, always called first, always. From the time she was old enough to scribble a backwards D on construction paper, she'd find some way to make my birthday feel like the most important day in the whole damn calendar. She'd wake me up with her little voice yelling through the house, "Daddy, get up, it's your day." And she'd shove her crooked homemade cards into my hands with such pride it made my throat close up every time. When she got older, she'd still make the effort. In high school, she'd barge into my room with some goofy balloon she picked up on the way home. In college, she'd FaceTime me even if she was half asleep, surrounded by empty coffee cups and textbooks, mumbling, "Happy birthday, Dad." I'm exhausted, but I didn't forget. After her steady year in Australia, she'd call me with that strange new mix of American English, sprinkled with Aussie slang she picked up. "Happy birthday, Dad. Hope your day's a ripper." And I'd laugh, because even if I didn't know half of what she meant, hearing her voice made every year worth it. But that morning, nothing. Not a sound. Not even a buzz from my phone. Not even a delayed text that said, "Sorry, overslept," which she used to send whenever she messed up. No, "Happy birthday, old man," her favorite teasing line. Just silence. Cold, uncomfortable silence that felt too wrong, too heavy, too unfamiliar. At first, I tried to ignore the sting. I told myself maybe she was sleeping in. She'd always been a night owl. Maybe her phone died. Maybe work was busier than usual. Maybe she stepped into a meeting. Maybe, God help me, I told myself any excuse that would keep me from thinking the darker thing. She forgot. After that forgotten birthday, life didn't go back to normal the way I kept hoping it would. I told myself it was just a fluke, an oversight, a momentary lapse in the middle of her busy life. I clung to that thought the way a drowning man clings to a floating plank, because letting go meant admitting something was very, very wrong. But the truth has a funny way of creeping into your everyday moments. It starts as a whisper, a feeling you brush off, then grows louder each time you try to silence it. And before long, it becomes a shadow following you everywhere. That's what happened with Emma. My little girl, my pride, my life's biggest joy, started becoming distant. It wasn't sudden. I wish it had been. Sudden is easier. Sudden you can point at. Sudden gives you one moment to blame. But this was slow, painfully slow, like watching a familiar house in the fog disappear inch by inch. First, it was the phone calls. She used to call me on her drive home, complaining about traffic or asking if she should try a new recipe or just rambling because she knew I'd always listen. After the birthday, the calls dropped to once a week, then every other week. Then I realized I hadn't heard her voice in a month unless I was the one dialing first. And when I did call, she answered like she was halfway out the door, always in a rush, always just about to do something, always too busy to stay on the line more than 2 minutes. Visits went the same way. She used to show up unannounced, raiding my pantry like she still lived there, curling up on the old corduroy couch and talking my ear off about her co-workers, her trips, her latest obsession with some show she swore I had to watch. But after that birthday, every time I asked her to stop by, there was some reason she couldn't. Work, errands, a weekend trip. Next week, Dad, she'd promise, for sure next week. Next week never came. And even when I did see her, which became rarer than I ever imagined, she wasn't the same. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She hugged me, but it felt like muscle memory, not warmth. She talked, but not to me the way she used to. She sounded like someone rehearsing answers for a test. Careful, controlled, cautious. My daughter wasn't cautious with me. Never had been. But now she spoke like every word had to be polished before I was allowed to hear it. Like she was hiding a chapter of her life I no longer had permission to read. I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself she was growing up, building her own life, becoming her own woman, because that's what she deserved. That's what I raised her for. But there's a difference between a child growing up and a child growing away. And Emma wasn't just growing away, she was disappearing. And then there was him, Zach. The man who slipped into her life like a bookmark into a novel I had been reading for 27 years. I'll never forget the first day I met him. Emma brought him over on a Sunday afternoon because, as she said with that big proud smile, "Dad, he's special, you'll love him." Love him. I remember laughing at that, thinking no one could be good enough for my daughter, but whoever he was, I'd give him a fair shot. That's what good fathers do. We open the door, shake the hand, give the benefit of the doubt. But the moment I shook his hand, something in my gut tightened. He had the kind of handshake that wasn't firm out of confidence, it was firm out of competition. Like he needed me to know he was the man in control now. He held eye contact just a second too long, not to connect, but to dominate. And he called me sir. Now normally, sir wouldn't bother me. It's polite, respectful, but not the way he said it. His sir sounded like he was humoring me, like he was talking to a museum exhibit, a relic. He sat in my living room like he already owned it, man spreading on my couch while Emma tucked herself close to him in a way that made my stomach twist. Not because she shouldn't show affection, God knows I always wanted her to find someone who adored her, but because she acted different, nervous, eager. Watching him before she answered even the simplest question, like she needed his approval first. That wasn't my Emma. My Emma had opinions strong enough to knock down a brick wall. She never looked at anyone for validation. And yet, she kept glancing at him, every single time. He talked a lot about his job, his future, his plans, his dreams. The word "I" came out of his mouth more than any other, and Emma just giggled at everything he said, things that weren't even remotely funny. Little comments, little half-jokes, little braggy stories, all met with a laugh she never used with me. I watched her laugh that laugh, a laugh I'd never heard before, and I felt something cold settle under my ribs. But what really got me wasn't anything he did. It was everything that started happening after he came into her life. Or more accurately, everything that stopped happening. Everything that used to be between us. The calls, the spontaneous visits, the Sunday lunches, the way she asked for my advice before making decisions. All of it started fading as he became more involved. And every time I tried to talk to her one-on-one, every single time, he'd insert himself. She'd be mid-sentence, and he'd slide his arm around her, or butt into the conversation, or remind her they had plans. It was subtle, quiet, but effective. He was pulling her away, one small thread at a time. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being overprotective, that no man, no matter how cocky, could ever sever the bond between me and my daughter. But then came the first real crack, the one I couldn't pretend I didn't see. I asked her, gently, if everything was okay. I didn't accuse, I didn't lecture, I simply asked, "Are you sure he treats you right, sweetheart?" And the way she snapped, God, I'll never forget it. "Dad, stop being dramatic. You're reading into things." Zach treats me amazingly. Why can't you just be happy for me? Her words were sharp, but it was the look in her eyes that destroyed me. Defensive, annoyed. Like I was the problem, like my concern was an inconvenience she didn't have time for. Amazing. That was the word she used. A word that shouldn't have made my stomach turn, but it did. Because if he was so amazing, why had she suddenly forgotten the one person who raised her alone? Why had she become someone who forgot my birthday, the one tradition she never broke? Why did she act like reaching out to me was a chore instead of a desire? Where had my daughter gone? I didn't push. I backed off the way parents do when they're terrified that one wrong word will push their child even further away. I swallowed the hurt. I stayed quiet. And I waited for things to get better. But they didn't. They got worse. And the worst part, I didn't even know the full truth yet. I didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. I didn't know what Zach had been telling her, what he had been twisting, what lies were growing like weeds in the cracks of our relationship. All I knew was this. Something in my family had begun to rot, and I was the last one to notice. But soon, I would. And when I finally saw the whole picture, it would break something inside me I never knew could break. The real crack in the dam didn't appear with some dramatic blowout or screaming match, the kind of moment you'd expect in a movie. No, it came quietly, disguised in the softness of an ordinary Saturday morning, wrapped in the scent of warm lemon and nostalgia. It came on a day that should have been simple, peaceful, uncomplicated. The kind of day a father hopes will remind his daughter of simpler times before life, adulthood, and relationships made everything messy. I had woken up early that morning with this strange ache in my chest, a sort of longing that made me feel older than I actually was. Not physically, I'm 58, not dead, but emotionally. In that way only a parent can feel when someone they love slips through their fingers. I stared at the ceiling for a while, thinking about Emma as a little girl, sitting on the counter kicking her tiny legs while I mixed batter in a big metal bowl. She always begged me to make lemon loaf on Saturdays because she claimed it tasted like sunshine bread. She meant it literally. She took one bite, closed her eyes, and told me it felt warm like sunshine on her tongue. Funny the things kids say, and even funnier what they remember. That lemon loaf became ours, our thing. A tradition born out of grief and healing after her mother passed, something that started as a distraction and grew into a ritual of comfort. That morning, nostalgia pulled me into the kitchen before I even knew what I was doing. I took out the ingredients like my hands were on autopilot. Eggs, lemons, sugar, flour, butter. I cracked, whisked, stirred, poured, all the motions I'd done hundreds of times before, and the kitchen filled with the familiar smell that always made Emma come running from whatever room she was in. For a moment, it felt like she was still that little girl with flour on her cheeks, begging to lick the spoon. But the truth was, the last time she'd asked me to make it had been almost a year ago. Still, I baked it. Still, I drove across town with it wrapped in a dish towel like it was something precious. Still, I hoped. I didn't call ahead. I didn't text. I didn't do any of the things polite adults do because I wasn't just some adult. I was her father. The man who raised her through scraped knees, heartbreaks, bad grades, and the worst loss imaginable. I was the man who stayed up all night helping her finish projects, who took her on road trips when the house felt too empty after her mother died, who taught her how to swim, how to drive, how to stand up for herself. I wasn't a visitor. I was home. Or, at least, I used to be. When I pulled into the driveway of her new house, the house she'd moved into with Zach, I noticed her car parked crookedly on the side, like she'd rushed in the night before. There were beer cans peeking out of the recycling bin. New patio furniture, His doing, I figured. Emma wasn't the type to spend money on unnecessary things. She used to tease me, call me Mr. Practical, but the truth was she had inherited my practicality. Or she used to. I walked up to the front door, lemon loaf warm in my hands, and knocked. Not loud, just enough for her to hear. I waited, listening for her footsteps. But instead, I heard laughter. Not her laugh first. His. Zach's laugh barreled through the hallway like it owned the space. It wasn't a normal laugh either. It was that arrogant, chest-puffed-out kind of laugh men use when they're trying to show off. It rubbed me the wrong way immediately. And then, under it, I heard Emma's laughter. Softer. Different. Not the laugh she used to have with me. That big, unrestrained, goofy one that came from her whole chest. But a polite, almost self-conscious version she seemed to have adopted since meeting him. For a moment, a stupid little spark lit up inside me. I thought maybe the timing was good, that maybe they were in a good mood and things would feel less strained. Maybe we'd reconnect. Maybe today would be the day I finally felt like her father again. But when the door finally swung open, that spark died instantly. Emma stood there, but it wasn't the face of surprise turning into joy like I expected. It was surprise sinking into discomfort, then shifting into something that stung like acid, annoyance. She looked at me like I was an unexpected interruption in her schedule, not the father who had spent half his life putting her first. Her shoulders tensed, her smile never arrived, and she pushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear the way she did when she was anxious. But this time it wasn't the sweet kind of anxious. It was the kind that said, "Why are you here?" "Oh, Dad," she said, voice stiff as a board, "what are you doing here?" The tone hit harder than the words. She spoke like a stranger opening the door to a pushy salesman, like my presence needed justification. I held up the loaf, trying to keep my voice even. "I baked your favorite. Thought I'd stop by." Her eyes didn't soften. They didn't widen. They didn't do anything except flick for a moment, past me, over my shoulder, then back inside the house like she needed to check something, or someone. And I realized she wasn't looking for anything. She was making sure Zach approved. And right on cue, he appeared behind her, shirtless, smirking, holding a craft IPA like it was the middle of a lazy summer afternoon instead of 9 in the morning. He leaned against the doorframe behind her like he'd been waiting for this moment, waiting to assert his dominance, waiting to show her who really held the reins. "Hey, Bill." He dragged my name into a long, condescending drawl. "Didn't know we were expecting company." Expecting company. Like I was some outsider. Like I needed an invitation. I was her father. I didn't need permission. Not then, not ever. But before I could say anything, Emma stepped forward, subtly shifting her body so she was blocking most of the doorway, closing the distance between us in the worst way possible, by closing herself off. "Dad," she said, lowering her voice as if she was scolding a child, "you really can't just show up. We're adults now. We have boundaries." Boundaries. The word hit me like a punch to the stomach. Boundaries? With her father? A father who raised her alone for 27 years, who had never once taken from her more than she offered, who had spent every breath trying to make up for the mother she lost too soon. She said it like I was invading her privacy. She said it like I was violating some unspoken rule. She said it like Zach had planted that word in her mouth and watered it until it grew into something poisonous. I swallowed, the lemon loaf suddenly feeling so heavy it might as well have been made of bricks. I just wanted to surprise you," I said quietly. But she didn't reach for the loaf. She didn't thank me. She didn't step aside or invite me in. She didn't even soften her voice. And then she delivered the sentence, the one that would stay with me longer than any wound, longer than any fight, longer than any scar. "Dad, you're becoming a bit much. Please just give us space." A bit much. The man who held her hand the day her mother died, who stayed up with her through nightmares, who worked double shifts to pay for her tuition, who never once made her feel like a burden, now suddenly too much. I felt the air leave my lungs in a way I can't describe. It was like being punched, but from the inside. Like something collapsed in my chest quietly without fanfare, just broke. I nodded, because that's what fathers do when they're hurt. We nod. We pretend. We step back even when every part of us wants to step forward. I handed her the loaf again. A last attempt, a small gesture, a peace offering. She didn't take it. Her arms stayed crossed over her chest like she was bracing against me. So I lowered it, turned around, and walked back to my truck with the lemon loaf still in my hands, feeling foolish, feeling old, feeling like someone had carved a hollow space inside me and left it empty. As I drove away, the loaf slid on the passenger seat, leaving a faint buttery smell in the air. I didn't touch it. I didn't look at it. All I could focus on was the echo of her words replaying over and over in my mind. "You're becoming a bit much." Not "I love you." Not "thank you." Not "come inside." Just too much. And the more I thought about it, the more everything fell into place. This wasn't just distance. This wasn't weeks passed after that lemon loaf morning. Weeks where I kept checking my phone without meaning to, where I told myself every vibration might be her reaching out, apologizing, explaining, softening. But the phone stayed silent, except for robocalls and junk messages from companies I never remembered signing up with. Not a single missed call from my daughter. Not a single text bubble. My name didn't cross her screen once, and I tried to pretend that didn't mean anything. I tried to pretend she was just busy, just overwhelmed, just adjusting to life with Zach. I fed myself excuses like medicine, even when they tasted bitter. And then, on a Wednesday afternoon that looked like any other, sun sharp through the blinds, mail scattered across the kitchen table, I saw it. A plain white envelope. No decoration, no heart-shaped stickers like she used to put on anything she mailed me. Not even her handwriting on the front. Just a printed label with my name. Cold. Formal. Like something from an office. Not from my child. I remember holding it in my hands longer than necessary, running my thumb along the edge, feeling the weight of it before I even opened it. I didn't know why, but something inside me tightened the moment I saw it, like my body understood before my brain did, like my heart already knew what was coming and wanted one last moment of stillness before the blow landed. When I slid the invitation out, the thick cardstock looked expensive. Too expensive. The kind of material people use to impress strangers, not family. The front was embossed with shiny gold lettering, crisp and perfect, and soulless. I stared at those words for a long time, my eyes tracing the lines even though I already understood what it meant. She was getting married, and I wasn't part of the story. The names hit me first. Emma Grace Hawkins. Not Emma Garner, not my daughter as I had known her since the second they placed her in my arms and she gripped my pinky like it was the most important thing in the world. No, Hawkins. His name. Zach's name. She had taken it already. Before the wedding. Before the vows, before the ceremony, she had erased mine without even the courtesy of telling me she planned to. And something about seeing her identity rewritten, seeing my legacy scrubbed off like chalk on a board, made my chest tighten with a grief I didn't have words for. Not anger, not yet, just loss. Deep, visceral loss. I kept reading, even though my eyes burned. The venue was a vineyard 3 towns over, a nice one, fancy, elegant. Nothing wrong with that, but she hadn't mentioned it to me. She hadn't asked my opinion the way she used to do whenever big decisions came up. For her high school prom dress, she asked me. For her college apartment, she asked me. For every birthday, for every holiday, for every new chapter of her life, I'd always been the person she checked in with, the person she counted on, until now. Then I got to the dress code. Modern elegance. It wasn't the words themselves that hurt. It was the tone, the message hidden beneath it. It didn't feel like Emma's style, my daughter who once wore mismatched socks to Thanksgiving because she said it made life fun. Now, this was his influence, his world, his rules, his vision of what her life should look like. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it only grew heavier as I reached the bottom of the invitation. And there it was, a small little sentence at the bottom that cribbed itself into my stomach like a cold steel knife. Limited seating, adults only. Adults only. That phrase shouldn't have meant anything to me. It shouldn't have hit me the way it did. But the moment I read it, something twisted inside me. It felt like a barrier, another invisible wall between the life she had before and the life she was building now. Another way of saying, keep your distance. You don't belong in this new world. Still, I told myself I was overthinking, that I was being sensitive, sentimental, foolish. I held the invitation up to the light like maybe I had missed something, some tiny note in invisible ink, something that said she still needed me. But the card offered nothing, except its cold, beautiful emptiness. Then I turned it over. That was when the real pain hit. There was a schedule printed on the back, a nice little timeline of her big day, but nowhere did it say, father of the bride. No mention of me walking her down the aisle, no father-daughter dance, no toast from her dad, no moment reserved for the man who raised her alone, who held her when she cried, who sacrificed everything so she could grow up safe, educated, loved. I wasn't in the ceremony. I wasn't in the program. I wasn't in the plan. I was just a guest, a man in a chair, a name on a list, a formality. And that realization crushed something in me. It didn't break me, not yet, but it cracked the foundation. Because weddings aren't just celebrations, they're declarations. They're statements of who matters, who belongs, who shaped you, who stands with you as you step into your future. And my daughter, my only child, had declared publicly, formally, proudly, that I was no one. But the anger didn't come right away. First came the confusion, the numbness, the ache. The long, quiet hours where I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that invitation like it was some kind of puzzle I could solve if I just looked long enough. I kept trying to piece together how we had gone from weekly phone calls and shared traditions to this cold, glossy card that felt more like a dismissal than an invitation. I tried to imagine her writing it, signing off on it, approving the design. Did she hesitate? Did she think of me at all? Did she wonder if I'd notice I wasn't listed in any role? Or did she push those thoughts aside because it was easier than facing whatever truth she didn't want to say out loud? But the worst part, the most painful part, wasn't anything printed on the card. It was the absence of me. And that absence said more than any words could. I accepted the pain quietly, the way fathers do when the world tells them to swallow their hurt and carry on. But deep inside, a small, sharp ember of anger began to glow, just faintly, just quietly, but enough that I felt it warming the edges of my grief. And that ember became a flame. The moment I learned the truth behind that invitation, the moment I discovered something she never meant for me to hear, something that changed everything. Because that invitation wasn't cold. It was calculated. And it wasn't her doing. Not entirely. I remember that afternoon like it's burned into the walls of my house. It was one of those strangely quiet days, the kind where the air feels heavier than usual and even the clock ticking on the wall sounds louder, almost impatient. I was sitting at my kitchen table, rereading the wedding invitation for maybe the 10th time, trying to figure out how my daughter's entire life could have shifted so far away from me without making a sound. The envelope sat there like an accusation. No handwritten note, no personal message, just a printed piece of cardstock telling me where to sit, what to wear, and what not to expect. That's when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Local area code. I almost ignored it. Lord knows I get enough spam calls, but something made me pick up. Maybe intuition, maybe fate, maybe just the fact that I've been alone too damn much lately and I'll answer anything that gives me a break from the silence. "Hello?" I said, half expecting a car warranty pitch. But instead, there was a woman's voice. Soft, shaky, almost like she wasn't sure she dialed the right number. "Hi, is this Bill Garner?" she asked. My spine straightened. "Yes, ma'am, this is Bill. Who's calling?" There was a pause, not a normal pause. This was the kind of pause where someone is deciding whether to tell you the truth or hang up and pretend the whole thing never happened. Finally, she said, "My name... Well, I'm not sure I should be telling you this. I work at the vineyard, the one where your daughter's wedding is happening." Right then, something cold slid down the back of my neck. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She continued, her voice dropping lower like she was making sure no one else could hear her. "I overheard a meeting yesterday. Your daughter wasn't there, but her fiancé was, and he was talking about you." I didn't breathe for a moment. She said, "Your daughter didn't forget your birthday." I felt my chest tighten. My ears buzzed. I actually thought I misheard her. "I'm sorry, what?" "She didn't forget," the woman repeated more firmly this time. "He told her not to call you." The world around me stilled. Everything inside me froze mid-motion. It was like someone pressed pause on my entire life. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. "Why would he say that?" I asked, but my voice barely made it out. The woman hesitated before answering, and when she did, it felt like someone shoved a fist into my stomach. "He told her you were too emotional, that you made her look weak. He said she needed distance from you if she wanted to look mature, put together." Her voice wavered. "He said you hold her back." Hold her back. I raised that girl alone after her mother died. I stayed up with her when she had the flu, when she had nightmares, when she failed her first college exam and cried for hours thinking she wasn't good enough. I helped her move into every apartment, fixed her car 3 separate times and worked overtime so she could go to the school she dreamed of. Weak, attached, holding her back. My jaw clenched so hard I felt the popping sound near my ear. But the woman wasn't done. And what came next was worse. "There's something else," she whispered. "During the meeting, he said he didn't want you walking her down the aisle." My stomach dropped. Not fell, dropped, like an elevator whose cable just snapped. Why? I asked. But I already knew the answer wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't justify anything. She inhaled shakily, and I could hear anxiety woven through every breath. He said, and I'm sorry, sir, he said that you wouldn't match the aesthetic. The aesthetic. The word people use when talking about Instagram feeds, not family. A word used by people who care more about appearances than meaning. A word that, for the first time in my life, made me feel small, made me feel disposable. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat locked up like someone had reached in and squeezed it shut. The woman must have sensed my silence because she spoke quickly like she was afraid I'd hang up. I'm sorry, Mr. Garner. I shouldn't have told you, but I couldn't just watch that happen. You deserve better. You deserve to know what I heard. I swallowed. Hard. Thank you, I whispered, barely holding myself together. She apologized again before hanging up, but I barely heard her. My ears were ringing. My pulse thumped in my throat. Something inside me, something old, something protective, something fatherly, rose like a tide I could not hold back. I lowered the phone slowly onto the table, staring at the wood grain like it held answers. The house around me hummed with silence, heavy, thick, choking. My daughter didn't forget my birthday. She was told not to call me, told not to include me, told I made her look weak, told I didn't fit her new life. This wasn't distance. This wasn't her growing up. This was manipulation, isolation, control wrapped in pretty packaging. Someone was steering her away from me, painting me as some burden she needed to shed. And as I sat there in that quiet kitchen, the truth sank into me like a blade made of ice. I wasn't losing my daughter by accident. I was losing her by design. And the man responsible, the man who thought he could erase me, the man who thought I didn't match the aesthetic, he was about to learn exactly who I was. Because I wasn't going to fight him. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for my place at my own wedding invitation. No. I was going to do something far more powerful. Something unforgettable. Something he would never see coming. And by the time I was done, my daughter would remember who her father truly was. Not an inconvenience. Not an extra. Not a background character in her new life, but the man who raised her, the man who loved her, the man she should never have been turned against. That was the moment everything shifted. The moment my plan began forming, quietly, calmly, like a storm building far off in the distance, a storm that was headed straight for her wedding day. That night, after the phone call from the woman at the vineyard, I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. I sat in my old recliner, the same brown one Emma used to curl up on when she was little and too scared to sleep alone during thunderstorms. And I stared at the wall, like it suddenly held every answer I'd been searching for. It didn't, of course. Walls never do. But memories can be loud enough to drown out the quiet. I reached for the stack of photo albums under the coffee table. The ones Emma and I made together every New Year's Day. It was our tradition. She'd pick the pictures, I'd write the captions, and by midnight we'd be covered in glue, glitter, and cheap takeout containers. It was messy, ridiculous, and perfect. I opened the first album, the one with a peeling ladybug sticker on the cover, and there she was on the first page, 5 years old, frosting smeared across her cheeks like she'd been in a cake explosion. Her smile was so wide it barely fit the page. I could still hear her giggling, still hear her saying, "Dad, look, I'm a dessert monster," while running laps around the kitchen. I remembered chasing her with a napkin, begging her not to get icing on the couch. Back then, she thought I was a superhero. Back then, I thought nothing in the world could break what we had. I turned another page. Emma at 12, eyes red and puffy, clinging to me after some girl at school told her she wasn't pretty enough to sit with the cool kids. I remembered kneeling down, cupping her face, and telling her, "You're more than pretty, kiddo. You're kind. You're sharp. You're you. And there's nobody better." She'd cried harder then, buried her face in my chest and whispered, "Dad, you always know what to say." Another page. 16 years old, first breakup. She came home soaking wet from the rain, heart shattered into 1,000 pieces because some teenage boy decided she wasn't fun enough. She walked straight into my arms, shivering, sobbing, asking, "Daddy, why wasn't I enough?" And I held her tight and told her she was more than enough. She was too much for boys who didn't know the value of something real. Flip. 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 Every page was a chapter of us. The struggles, the victories, the silly holiday crafts, the time she burned cookies and blamed the oven, the time she'd fall asleep with her head on my shoulder during movie nights. Each picture reminded me that she hadn't always been this distant version of herself. She used to run to me, not away from me. But now she was letting a man who barely knew her, erase everything we built, piece by piece, memory by memory, as if fatherhood were optional, as if love had an expiration date. I rested my hand on one of the pages, her at 21 in her graduation gown. She had insisted I wear a tie that matched her dress because she wanted the photos to look perfect. She grabbed my arm in every picture, proud to show the world who raised her. She called me her rock that day, her anchor, her best friend. And now I was too emotional, too attached, unnecessary drama. Hearing those words replay in my mind stirred something deep in me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity, sharp and cold like winter air hitting your lungs. I wasn't losing my daughter naturally. I wasn't watching her grow up and drift away on her own. No, this wasn't that. Someone was pulling her away. Someone was whispering poison into her ear. Someone was repainting her history and trying to scrub me out like a stain that didn't match their aesthetic. That word, aesthetic, kept echoing through my mind like an insult, as if a father's love were somehow off-brand, as if walking her down the aisle would ruin their curated little picture-perfect wedding. Well, if they wanted perfect, they should have stopped trying to erase the imperfect parts of life, because those imperfect pieces are the ones that matter most. Hours passed. The house got darker, quieter, but my mind was wide awake. I thought about ignoring the whole wedding, staying home, letting her realize someday, maybe years down the line, that she had pushed away the one person who would have stood beside her through anything. But that felt cowardly. It felt like giving up. And that's not who I am. That's not who I raised her to be either. I thought about confronting Zach, telling him off, forcing him to admit what he'd done, but that wouldn't fix anything. That would only make me look like the emotional father he'd painted me out to be. No, confronting him privately would give him exactly what he wanted. Another excuse to make me look unstable, dramatic, messy. Then I thought about confronting Emma, sitting her down, showing her the photos, reminding her of the life we had. But she wasn't listening anymore. She was blinded by love, by loyalty, by manipulation, maybe all three. Talking wouldn't break through. Not now. Not in the state she was in. So I kept flipping through those albums, through decades of laughter and scraped knees and birthday candles and broken crayons. And at some point, without even realizing it, tears started rolling down my cheeks. Quiet ones. The kind you don't wipe because they belong there. They're earned. And that's when the truth hit me with the force of a punch. If I didn't remind her of who I was, no one else would. Not Zach. Not his family. Not her new circle of friends who treated me like an antique in a thrift shop. Not even Emma herself. Not the version she'd become. She needed to remember. She needed to see me. Really see me. So on her wedding day, I wasn't going to ruin anything. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to shout or accuse or demand anything. I was going to stand tall. I was going to be calm. I was going to show the world and her exactly what a father looks like when he refuses to be erased. Dignified, steady, unshakable. And yes, unforgettable. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's truth. Delivered at the perfect moment, in front of the perfect audience, in a way that leaves the right people speechless and the wrong people exposed. And as the sun began to rise the next morning, casting warm gold through my blinds, I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. It was about love. The real kind. The kind that stays even when the world tries to push it away. And on her wedding day, I was going to remind my daughter just how much that love mattered. Whether Zach liked it or not. The morning of the wedding felt heavier than any morning I'd lived through in years. The sunrise came up slow and gold, stretching across the valley like it was unsure whether it should brighten the day or spare me the trouble. I sat in my truck for a good 10 minutes before I even stepped out, rubbing my hands across the steering wheel the way I used to when I'd wait outside Emma's school, nervous about her first parent-teacher meeting. Funny how life circles back to the same kind of nerves, just wrapped in different skin. The vineyard truly was something out of one of those lifestyle magazines Emma used to collect as a teenager. Neatly trimmed rows of grapevines, soft green rolling hills, and those tall white wooden archways, decorated with enough flowers to make it look like spring had been bottled and poured all over the place. Guests walked around in polished shoes and stiff dresses, holding programs and complimenting the decor like that was the point of it all. But none of that mattered to me. I wasn't there for the vines or the decor. I was there for one person, my daughter. When I stepped onto the stone path leading toward the ceremony area, I saw her before she saw me. She was standing near a set of French doors, adjusting a dress with small, jittery hands. She was beautiful. There was no denying that. Her dress was everything she had probably dreamed of since she was a girl. White lace that shimmered when the light hit it, soft layers drifting around her legs like clouds. For a moment, just one, my chest tightened with pride. That was my little girl, my Emma. But that feeling didn't last. Because when she turned and her eyes landed on me, the expression on her face wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It wasn't that childlike warmth she used to beam at me whenever I showed up anywhere. Instead, her eyes widened like she had been caught off guard. Startled. Uneasy. Almost like she didn't expect me to show up. Like I was some unpredictable variable she hadn't accounted for. Her shoulders tensed. Her hand froze mid-adjustment on the edge of her veil. For a second, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. The space between us was filled with everything left unsaid over the past year. Then she stepped forward, her lips parting like she was searching for the right line in a script she hadn't rehearsed enough. Dad, hi. I just, she stuttered. Her voice caught somewhere between surprise and discomfort. I didn't let her finish. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I knew anything she said in that moment would only dig the knife a little deeper. So I cut in gently, my voice softer than I felt. You look beautiful. And for the first time in months, hell, maybe the first time in a year, her eyes softened. Just a flicker. A small crack in the wall she'd been building between us. I saw the girl who used to climb on my shoulders to hang Christmas ornaments, the teenager who cried into my chest when she didn't get into her first-choice college, the young woman who hugged me at the airport after her Australia trip, telling me she missed her old man. But that tenderness vanished as fast as it came. Because that's when he arrived. Zach slid into frame like a shadow that didn't belong to the sun. He draped his arm over her shoulders with that same possessive ease I'd seen the first day I met him. His smile was wide, too wide, practiced, sharp around the edges. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Well, Bill, he said, his tone far too enthusiastic to be real. Glad you made it. Seriously. Just make sure you follow the seating chart, okay? The ushers will point you to the right section. We worked really hard on keeping things organized. There was something about the way he emphasized the word organized. Like the whole event was a company retreat, and I was just a middle-tier employee he needed to manage. He didn't look at me like I was the bride's father. He looked at me like I was a nuisance he had to tolerate for 45 minutes before the reception. But I didn't show anything. I kept my face calm, my voice steady. I know where I'm sitting. Not rude, not confrontational, just neutral, controlled. Emma looked back and forth between us, her fingers nervously brushing the lace of her dress. She looked like she wanted to say something more to me, something meaningful or apologetic or even just human, but she didn't. And I didn't push her. I wasn't here to create a scene or to force a moment that wasn't meant to happen. No. I wasn't there to start anything. I was there to finish something. I watched as she and Zach walked away, heading toward the bridal suite. His hand stayed glued to her waist, guiding her like she was something he owned, something fragile he had to position correctly. And every step he took reminded me why I was there. Not to ruin her day, not to humiliate her, not to punish her, but to remind her, gently, firmly, and undeniably, who had stood by her through every storm life had thrown at her, who raised her, who protected her, who loved her long before he ever showed up with his crafted smile and his craft IPA personality. As I found my seat, way in the back, as expected, I noticed the small printed card on the chair. My name, Mr. William Garner, in tiny font, squeezed in like I was a distant cousin from another state. Every other father I'd ever seen at a wedding sat in the front, where family belonged. But not me. I was supposed to sit quietly, clap politely, and vanish into the background like I'd never been in the picture at all. But weddings are funny things. People think they can choreograph every moment, every camera angle, every tear. But some moments, some truths, some reckonings, they can't be scheduled, they can't be avoided, they can't be neatly boxed into a seating chart. And this wedding, my daughter's wedding, was about to become one of those moments. Because everything Zach had hidden, everything Emma didn't want to see, everything that had been whispered behind closed doors, it was all going to come out. Not with yelling, not with chaos, Not with any scene people whisper about for the wrong reasons, but with something far more powerful. The truth. And I was holding it in my pocket, burning hotter than the afternoon sun beating across the vineyard. The ceremony hadn't even begun, and I already knew this day was about to change everything. Not just for Emma, not just for Zach, but for me. For all of us. And it wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be messy. It wouldn't be dramatic in the way people expect weddings to be dramatic. No. It would be unforgettable. The ceremony had gone by without a hitch, almost suspiciously smooth, the kind of smooth that feels rehearsed rather than heartfelt. The vineyard glowed gold under the late afternoon sun, the breeze rolling gently across the open field, brushing against the rows of white chairs like a hand smoothing out wrinkles on a tablecloth. Everyone looked good, everyone smiled, everyone played polite. If you didn't know what was underneath, the tension, the secrets, the shifting loyalties, you might have mistaken the whole scene for some polished wedding commercial. But I wasn't there for the pretty scenery. I wasn't there for the fancy dresses or the overpriced centerpiece flowers or the catered salmon everyone pretended to like. I was there for something deeper, something I'd been holding in my chest for months, something that sat heavy inside me like a truth waiting to be released. And the moment had finally come. The reception hall buzzed with chatter, glasses clinking, chairs scraping, people laughing just a little too loudly at jokes that didn't land. The band played some soft background tune, the kind of music that floats between tables unnoticed. I sat quietly at my assigned table, far from the head table, far from my daughter, far from where a father should be sitting. I stared at my untouched plate and felt this odd calm, almost like the eye of a storm. Everything around me swirled, but inside, I was steady. Then the DJ tapped the microphone. A hush floated through the room like a ripple. All right, folks, it's time for speeches. A few people clapped, a few groaned, a few braced themselves for cliches. The best man got up first, a tall guy with that easy confidence of someone who's never had to struggle through anything. He launched into a predictable routine, jokes about college nights, drinking stories, frat boy memories, half-baked humor wrapped in nostalgia. People forced laughter because that's what you do at weddings. You pretend the jokes are funny even when they're not. But I wasn't listening. I was watching. I watched Zach slap the table laughing too hard at his friend's jokes, the performative kind of laugh meant to signal, look at us, we're having fun, we're the center of attention. I watched Emma smile politely, her eyes scanning the room like she was waiting for something or someone to make today feel right. I watched guests lean into the speech, already expecting the next predictable story. Then the best man wrapped up, everyone clapped, and the DJ smiled like he was following the script. And then he said the sentence that cracked the atmosphere right down the middle. And now the father of the bride will say a few words. You could have heard a pin drop. The music stopped, the forks froze midair, and in the middle of it all, Zach choked on his champagne like someone had sucker punched him. He wasn't expecting me to speak. He wasn't expecting me to stand. He wasn't expecting me to exist beyond the edges of a seating chart he'd so carefully controlled. Emma turned to me instantly, her eyes wide, soft confusion written across her face. I didn't put you on the list, she whispered, trembling just a little. Dad, I didn't even... I know, I said quietly. But today isn't about lists. I could swear something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or relief, or that old instinct of hers to trust me, to lean toward me like she used to when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. But before she could say anything else, the room gently guided its attention towards me like a tide shifted by the moon. I stood slowly, not with pride, not with anger, not with the intention of stealing the spotlight, just with the weight of a man who has something to say and knows there's no turning back once he starts. The floorboards creaked beneath my shoes as I walked towards the front. Every step felt heavier than the last, but steadier too, like my heart finally agreed with my feet on where we needed to go. I took the microphone, and the room felt completely, Utterly silent. Even the children leaned in. Even the vineyard outside seemed to pause. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't shuffle my notes. I didn't pretend to be nervous. I just began speaking. The voice that came out wasn't loud, wasn't shaky. It was warm, steady, lived in. The voice of a father. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," I said softly, and already I saw Zach practically deflate. "I'm not here to take over the night. I'm just here because I raised this girl." I turned to Emma, my daughter, my world, my once constant companion, sitting there in her white dress, looking at me like she hadn't heard my voice in years, and was suddenly reminded of something she didn't realize she missed. "Emma, I've watched you grow from a little girl who couldn't sleep without checking for monsters under the bed, to a woman who faced real monsters life threw at you. Heartbreak, stress, disappointment, and you never gave up." Her eyes shimmered instantly. I kept going, slowly, carefully, every word deliberate. "I raised you after your mom passed, and you raised me in ways you never realized. You gave me purpose. You made me better. You made me laugh when I didn't think laughter still existed for me." I heard soft sniffles from tables around the room. And I know life has changed. I know people grow up. I know families shift. I know things don't stay the same. But what doesn't change, what never changes, is the foundation you come from. Zach shifted again, sharp, uncomfortable, like he was sitting on a hot stove. I let my eyes rest on him only briefly before returning to Emma. "And sometimes," I continued, "there are people in your life who will try to pull you away from your roots. People who say your history makes you weak. People who treat your past like a burden, not a blessing." A soft murmur spread across the room. Everyone knew exactly who I meant. Everyone felt the weight of it. A man who truly loves my daughter will honor the people who built her. A man who loves her will never isolate her, never shame her, never speak for her, never tell her who she can and cannot love. And he sure as hell won't rewrite her story to fit his own aesthetic. Zach went still, stiff, frozen, exposed. The air around him felt brittle enough to snap. Emma's breath hitched, her chin quivering. I held the microphone a little closer, not for volume, but for honesty. "And Emma, if anyone at all ever tells you I'm too much, too emotional, too attached, too involved." I paused, letting every word sink into the room, letting truth land like a soft hammer. "Remember this. I loved you first, and I'll love you last." Silence. Then someone clapped. Then another, then the entire room rose to its feet, erupting into applause so powerful it felt like the floor itself vibrated with emotion. People wiped their faces, mothers hugged their sons, strangers clapped like they were witnessing something sacred. Zach sat frozen, pale, shrinking into his own chair like a man who realized the ground beneath him had finally given out. And right then, Emma stood up, tears running freely down her cheeks, and walked straight towards me. Not slowly, not hesitantly, but with urgency, like a daughter running home. She wrapped her arms around me and sobbed into my shoulder, holding on like she was remembering a part of herself she thought she had lost. And in that moment, she remembered everything. Who I was, who she was, who we were. And more importantly, who had tried to erase that. The speech didn't ruin her wedding. It didn't cause chaos. It didn't steal attention. It restored something that had been quietly breaking for too long. The reception wound down slowly, like the final embers of a fire refusing to fade out. The music softened, the chatter mellowed, and the vineyard lights flickered across the open field like tiny stars resting on the earth. By the time most guests had filtered out, drifting toward shuttles and cars, I found a quiet moment for myself at the edge of the patio. The night was cool, soft, with the smell of grapes in the air. The kind of night that makes a man think a little deeper than he should. I leaned against one of the wooden posts near the string lights, looking out over the rows of vines. I couldn't help but wonder what my late wife would have said about everything that had happened. She used to tease me about overthinking, always said I had a mind that ran faster than my feet. I smiled at the memory, small and sad. I didn't expect anyone to come find me. Honestly, after that speech, I thought Emma would need time. Time to process, time to breathe, time to figure out what pieces of herself she'd lost and what she wanted back. But I heard footsteps behind me, soft but hurried, and when I turned, she was standing there, holding the bottom of her white dress so it wouldn't drag on the gravel. Her makeup wasn't picture perfect anymore. Her hair wasn't flawlessly pinned. She didn't look like the curated bride the wedding planner had shaped her into all day. She just looked like my daughter again. My little girl who used to run to me after school with scraped knees and big stories. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes full of something that looked heavier than guilt, heavier than regret, something like realization. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking as she tried to speak, "why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me what he said to you?" Those words hung in the air like fog that refused to lift. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady, because if I let any emotion climb too high, I knew I wouldn't be able to hold it. "Because," I said gently, "if I told you, you wouldn't have believed me. And even if you had, it would have felt like I was fighting for your attention, like I was trying to win you back." I shook my head. That's not a father's job. A father's job is to stand steady even when his child drifts away. She swallowed hard, like the truth was a lump she couldn't get down. Her hands trembled as she looked at me. "He told me you were being dramatic, that you were emotional, that you wanted to control me, that you didn't want me to grow up," she said, each word sounding like she regretted ever believing a single one. I stepped closer, placing my hand lightly on her shoulder. "Sweetheart," I said, and my voice softened the way it always did when she was younger. "The only thing I ever tried to control was how much you knew you were loved. That's it. That's all I've ever wanted for you, to know you matter." She blinked rapidly, but tears spilled anyway. Not the controlled, delicate kind brides cry during sentimental moments. These were raw tears, real, human, heavy with the weight of months she couldn't take back. "Dad, I'm sorry," she whispered. Then louder, like she needed to hear herself say it too. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I let him talk to me like that. I don't know why I believed him. I thought he knew better. I thought he understood me. I thought he wanted what was best for me." I pulled her into a hug, and for a moment it was like time folded on itself. She wasn't the bride in a fancy dress. She wasn't the woman who had drifted so far from me. She was just my little girl again, crying into my chest the way she used to when she broke a bone or got her heart bruised by life. I held her while she cried, letting her shake, letting her finally release everything she had swallowed for months. You could tell it wasn't just tonight that broke her open. It was everything she had been carrying alone, trying to balance love, loyalty, independence, and pressure all at once. Behind her, from the doorway of the reception hall, I saw movement. Zach stood there, his hands stuffed in his pockets, tense shoulders, jaw working like he was grinding his teeth. For the first time since I'd met him, he wasn't smirking. He wasn't smug. He wasn't pretending to be the man in charge. He just looked rattled. Not angry, not defensive, just shaken. Like someone had finally pulled the curtain back on the act he'd been performing. It dawned on me then that the speech I'd given wasn't about humiliating him. It wasn't about exposing him. It was about reminding Emma who she was and where she came from. And it worked. She remembered the love she'd been raised in. She remembered that her worth didn't come from someone upgrading her life. It came from the roots she grew from. Emma pulled away slightly, wiping her cheeks with her fingertips. "He told me you were clingy. He told me I made you look weak for loving you. He made me think needing my dad meant I wasn't independent," she said, voice trembling. "And I actually believed him. I thought maybe I needed to act colder to be stronger." I shook my head slowly. Needing people doesn't make you weak. Loving people doesn't make you weak. You don't have to toughen up to prove you're grown. You're strong because you care, not in spite of it. She nodded slowly. as if every sentence took a second to settle into her heart. Behind her, I could still feel Zach's eyes on us, but I didn't acknowledge him yet. Emma noticed and glanced back, then turned to me again. I don't know what to do. I mean, this is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but half the day I've been pretending. Pretending everything's perfect. Pretending I don't feel this distance between us. Pretending that voice in my head wasn't screaming that something felt off. I brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, the way I used to when she was 5 and couldn't sleep. You don't have to make any decisions tonight. Not about him, not about anything. Tonight isn't about what's next. Tonight's about remembering who you are and remembering I'm here, no matter what. She leaned her forehead against my chest again, letting out a shaky exhale. For a long moment we just stood there, father and daughter, both realizing how close we'd come to losing each other, and how quickly we found our way back with a few honest words. When she finally stepped back, her breathing steadier now, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled, feeling something in my heart unclench for the first time in months. I couldn't give up on you if I tried. You're my kid. You'll always be my kid. And for the first time in a long time, she believed me. Behind her, Zach finally moved, stepping back into the reception hall, as though he wasn't ready to deal with the truth that had just reshaped his whole narrative. Emma watched him disappear, her expression thoughtful, not angry, not devastated, just aware. Aware of the cracks she'd ignored, aware of the voice she'd silenced, aware of the father she'd nearly lost. The night grew quieter. The lights buzzed, the vines swayed in the soft breeze, and Emma stood beside me, slipping her arm around mine, something she hadn't done in years, leaning her head gently against my shoulder as we looked out into the dimly lit vineyard together. No more walls, no more distance, no more confusion. Just a father and daughter finally standing on the same side again. And in that quiet, tender moment under the vineyard lights, it became clear. The hold Zach had on her, the one he'd built on manipulation, isolation, and subtle digs, had finally started to crack. And once a crack appears, the truth always finds its way in. She found her way back to me, and that was worth every second of pain that led us here. She came back into my life on a Saturday morning that looked almost identical to the one when it all started. Except this time, the knock on my door wasn't something I dreaded. It wasn't confusion or distance or silence wearing a mask. It was my daughter, just my daughter, standing on my porch with a look I hadn't seen in what felt like years. Soft eyes, shoulders relaxed, a tiny tremble in her hands like she'd been rehearsing what to say but still wasn't sure how to start. "Dad, can I come in?" She didn't need to ask, but the fact that she did made my chest tighten in a way I wasn't ready for. I opened the door wider and she stepped inside like someone easing back into a familiar home after a long winter away. She wasn't dressed fancy. No makeup, no styled hair, no carefully curated outfit, just jeans, a hoodie, and the worn sneakers she used to leave by my staircase before she moved out. She looked around slowly, her eyes lingering on the framed pictures, the old couch, the cluttered coffee table. It was the same place she grew up in, the one filled with burnt pancake mornings and late-night homework sessions, and all the tiny invisible memories that make a house feel alive. And she whispered, almost under her breath, "I've missed this place." We sat on the couch together, the same spot where she once curled up after her first breakup at 16, insisting the world was ending. I didn't push her. I didn't ask questions. I just waited, hands clasped, breathing quietly, knowing that whatever she was about to say wasn't going to be easy. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "I've been going to therapy." I didn't react right away, not because I wasn't proud, but because I knew she wasn't done. Her voice wavered, but she kept going. I had to. I needed to understand why I let someone else decide how I should feel, why I let someone else speak for me, why I let myself drift so far away from you. She blinked quickly, fighting emotions she couldn't hide. I thought being independent meant shutting out the people who raised me. Turns out, independence has nothing to do with isolation. I nodded gently, letting her take her time. She took a shaky breath. I didn't leave Zach. Not yet. I'm trying to figure things out. But I'm not letting him run my relationships anymore. I'm not letting him define you, or tell me who to love or trust. She swallowed hard. And Dad, I want us back. Not the version where you carry everything and I just show up when I need you. I want a real relationship, one where I show up too. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. But then she leaned against me, not like a child in need of comfort, but like a grown woman choosing to reconnect, and said, quietly but firmly, "No one comes between us again. Ever." And the way she said it, it wasn't a promise thrown into the world to fade away later. It was a vow, a commitment, a piece of herself she was giving back to me willingly. We talked for hours after that, not just about the wedding or the months we lost or the coldness that had terrified me more than anything else. We talked about her job, her therapy sessions, her fears about marriage, her dreams for her future, and all the life I didn't realize she'd been keeping from me because someone convinced her that needing her father made her weak. And the craziest part? Our relationship didn't snap back to what it was. It evolved. It matured. She didn't treat me like a figure from her childhood anymore. She treated me like a guide, a confidant, a man she respected, not just the man who raised her. In some strange way, the wedding didn't break us. It rebuilt us. Just differently. Stronger. More honest. More balanced. Now she comes over without knocking, just like she used to. She kicks off her shoes on the rug I always trip over, drinks straight from the soda cans instead of pouring into a cup like she tried doing when she started acting grown, and laughs with her whole body the way she did before life complicated everything. And every March, without fail, she's the first one to call on my birthday. Not with some short text, not with some forced routine, but with the same excited voice she had when she was little, saying, "Happy birthday, Dad, I love you." Funny thing is, I don't need the perfect daughter. I never wanted perfection, just presence, just honesty, just her. And now, I have her back. Not because I fought for her, not because I guilted her, not because I made her choose, but because I reminded her of something she forgot. Family isn't a phase. It isn't an inconvenience. It isn't a weakness. It's a foundation. And when it cracks, whether from distance, manipulation, or silence, it can still be rebuilt, brick by brick, word by word, effort by effort. But only if love stays patient, only if truth stays steady, only if both people are willing to find their way back. And that's where the real moral lives. Moral of the story expanded. Sometimes the people we love don't walk away on purpose. They drift. They get influenced. They get pressured. They get convinced they need to toughen up, or look stronger, or move on from the people who shaped them. But love, real love, doesn't vanish. It doesn't crack under judgment. It doesn't fade under manipulation. It just waits, silently, patiently, like a porch light left on for someone you know is coming home, even if they're taking the long road back. And when truth finally comes to light, when the curtain gets pulled back, people often realize the person they were pushed away from was the very person who stood by them through every storm, every heartbreak, every growing pain. So if you ever feel forgotten or pushed aside or treated like a relic of someone's past, remember, you're not losing them. They're just lost. And sometimes the most unforgettable thing you can do is show them exactly where home is. Because the right people, they always find their way back. Especially when love has been waiting for them the whole time.